It's a project in southeastern Turkey at a site called Göbekli Tepe.
Here we are in the so-called enclosure D of Göbekli Tepe, A, B, C, D, numbered in order of the discovery, and D is a best preserved one.
Beneath a forgotten hill in southeastern Turkey lies Göbekli Tepe, a monument older than the pyramids, older than agriculture itself. How could hunter-gatherers carve massive stone pillars with such precision thousands of years before civilization? Klaus Schmidt spent decades uncovering its secrets, revealing carvings, circles, and mysteries that defy history and challenge everything we thought we knew about human origins. Göbekli Tepe, civilization in reverse. The first pillar Schmidt's team fully excavated stood 5.5 meters tall and weighed approximately 16 tons. It was carved from a single piece of limestone, shaped into a T that looked eerily anthropomorphic. The horizontal top like shoulders, the vertical shaft like a body. But it was the detail that stopped them cold. Every surface was covered in reliefs. Not crude scratchings or primitive stick figures, but sophisticated three-dimensional carvings of animals rendered with anatomical accuracy. A fox, its tail curved perfectly, every whisker visible in the stone. A wild boar, muscles defined, tusks gleaming where the limestone had been polished smooth. Scorpions so detailed you could count the segments in their tails. And everywhere, geometric symbols that looked almost like writing, but predated any known written language by 6,000 years. Schmidt stood before that first pillar for hours, running calculations in his head. The engineering alone was staggering. This wasn't a single stone placed by a lucky group of hunters.
The oldest temple unearthed anywhere. It was built 11,500 years ago by hunter-gatherers.
This was one of dozens of pillars, arranged in precise circular patterns, some circles nested inside others, in creating a complex that covered approximately 9 hectares. Ground-penetrating radar suggested there were at least 20 more circles still buried beneath the surface. Each circle contained between 8 and 12 pillars. Each pillar weighed between 10 and 20 tons. The math didn't work, not with what we knew about the capabilities of hunter-gatherers in 9600 BC. To quarry these stones, they would have needed copper or bronze tools. But metallurgy wouldn't be invented for another 6,000 years. They used stone tools. Limestone is relatively soft as stone goes, but even so, the precision of the cuts, the smoothness of the surfaces, the intricate detail of the carvings, all done with stone hammers and flint blades. It should have taken decades per pillar, yet there were dozens of them. To transport stones weighing up to 20 tons from the quarry to the construction site would have required sledges, rollers, ropes, and hundreds of people working in coordination. But these were supposedly small, nomadic hunter-gatherer bands, numbering perhaps 20 to 40 individuals. Where did they get the population? How did they organize? How did they feed hundreds of workers for the months or years required to complete the construction? The site itself provided some clues. Animal bones were everywhere, scattered among the pillars. Gazelle, aurochs, wild sheep, boar. The remains of thousands of animals butchered and consumed on site. This wasn't a settlement. There were no houses, no hearths, no evidence of permanent habitation. This was a construction site, a place where people gathered temporarily, in massive numbers, and to build something that mattered more than survival itself. But why? What could motivate pre-agricultural hunter-gatherers to invest this kind of time, energy, and resources into carved stone circles? They had no cities to defend, no kings to glorify, no priests demanding monuments to absent gods. The conventional explanations for monumental architecture, wealth concentration, social hierarchy, religious authority, none of it existed yet, not according to our timeline. Schmidt proposed a radical theory. Göbekli Tepe wasn't built by a simple society. It was built by the remnants of a complex one. He pointed to the sophistication of the carvings, the precision of the construction, the sheer scale of the project. This required specialized knowledge: geometry, astronomy, engineering, art. It required social organization, leadership, planning, division of labor. It required surplus resources. enough food to feed workers, enough stability to invest in non-survival activities. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. When Schmidt's team dug deeper, they discovered something that shattered conventional models of human progress. The oldest layers at Göbekli Tepe, the deepest excavations, didn't show primitive beginnings. They showed the peak of achievement. The earliest pillars were the largest, the most precisely carved, the most artistically sophisticated. As they excavated upward through time, as they moved from the oldest layers to the newer ones, the quality declined. The pillars got smaller, the carvings became cruder, the circles less geometrically precise. Civilization isn't supposed to work this way. We expect progress, and we expect each generation to build on the knowledge of the previous one, improving techniques, refining craftsmanship, advancing technology. That's the story we've told ourselves since Darwin. Evolution moves forward, societies develop from simple to complex, progress is inevitable. Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite. It suggests devolution, regression, a civilization in decline, not in ascent. And that changes everything. Secrets buried for 11,000 years. Schmidt would descend the excavation ladders each morning with a peculiar sense of vertigo. Not from the height, but from the chronology. Every meter down was another 500 years back in time. And every 500 years revealed something that shouldn't be there. Better craftsmanship, larger stones, more sophisticated design. The pattern emerged slowly. I revealed across years of meticulous excavation. In the uppermost layers, dated to around 8000 BC, the construction was almost crude. Smaller pillars, poorly shaped, with rough carvings that looked like the work of apprentices copying from memory. The circles were irregular. Some pillars leaned, the spacing was inconsistent. Down another layer, back to 8500 BC, the quality improved. Pillars grew taller, carvings became more detailed, circles approached geometric precision. Down another layer, 9000 BC, and the work was masterful. Pillars exceeding 5 meters in height, weighing 15 tons, carved with such detail that individual feathers were visible on stone birds. The circles were perfect, the spacing calculated to millimeter accuracy, and at the bottom, in the oldest layers, dated to 9600 BC, the work was transcendent. 120-ton pillars carved with three-dimensional reliefs so sophisticated that modern stonemasons struggle to explain how they were achieved with primitive tools. Geometric arrangements that incorporated astronomical alignments, symbols that suggested not just artistry, but meaning, purpose, knowledge. This wasn't the work of people learning, this was the work of people forgetting. Schmidt spent years grappling with this paradox. He published papers arguing that Göbekli Tepe represented a memorial, a desperate attempt by a declining civilization to preserve knowledge before it was lost entirely. The site wasn't a temple built by primitive peoples reaching upward toward complexity. It was a library carved by advanced peoples falling backward into simplicity. But a library of what? What knowledge were they trying to preserve? The carvings offered clues. Every pillar was covered in animals: lions, bulls, foxes, boars, snakes, scorpions, vultures, cranes. But these weren't random decorations. Schmidt noticed patterns. Certain animals appeared together repeatedly. Lions always faced north. Scorpions clustered near the bottom of pillars. Vultures perched at the top, wings spread as if in flight. Archaeoastronomy research has since suggested that many of these animal groupings correspond to ancient constellations. The position of certain carvings aligns with the position of stars at specific times of year in 9600 BC. One pillar, known as the Vulture Stone, appears to depict a date, approximately 10,950 BC, plus or minus 250 years. This is the approximate date of the Younger Dryas impact event, a catastrophic series of meteor strikes or comet fragments that triggered rapid global cooling.
Today, stunned by this image. This was debris from a meteor racing toward Earth, streaking across the sky.
Megafaunal extinction and potentially the end of the Ice Age. Were the builders of Göbekli Tepe recording this event? Were they survivors of a global catastrophe, attempting to leave warnings for future generations? Schmidt became convinced of it. In his final interviews, he spoke carefully but urgently about what he called the message of the stones. He suggested that Göbekli Tepe was built by people who had witnessed something terrible, people who understood that knowledge could be lost, that civilizations could collapse, that humanity could forget everything it had learned and be forced to start over from scratch. The human story embedded in these stones is haunting. Imagine you are among the last generation to possess advanced knowledge. Your grandparents knew things you only half understand. Your parents tried to teach you, but the disasters came too fast. Climate chaos, floods, extinctions, starvation. Your world is ending. Your cities are abandoned. Your people are scattered, reduced to small bands scraping out survival in a hostile landscape. But you remember. You remember that there was more, that humanity was capable of more, and you refuse to let that knowledge die completely. So you gather. From across the region, survivors converge on this hill. You bring what tools remain. You quarry stones with techniques passed down from better times. You carve everything you remember into limestone, knowing it will outlast you, outlast your children, outlast 1,000 generations. You create a monument not to your glory, but to your warning. You encode your knowledge in symbols, in astronomical alignments, in the careful placement of stones. And then you bury it, deliberately, carefully. You fill in the circles with rubble and earth, protecting the carvings from erosion, preserving the message for whenever humanity might be ready to understand it again. This is what Schmidt believed. This is what the evidence suggested. But it was only the beginning. Because beneath the visible pillars, beneath the excavated circles, ground-penetrating radar revealed something else entirely. Something that would force Schmidt to question not just the timeline of civilization, but the limits of what ancient peoples were capable of achieving. There were chambers down there, and they were empty.
It might be chamber, it might be something else. Very soon we can figure out what is the main issue of this corridor.
What lies beneath Göbekli Tepe? The first radar scans at Göbekli Tepe came back in 2003, and they changed everything. Klaus Schmidt had invited geophysicists from the University of Kiel to survey the site using ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry. Their task was simple, or so it seemed: map the unexcavated circles, estimate the scale of the complex, understand how far the site extended beneath the surface. What they discovered was anything but simple. Beneath the main excavation area, approximately 12 meters down, the scans revealed geometric voids. Rectangular chambers, hollow spaces where solid bedrock should have been. The walls were smooth, precise, and consistent. Nothing like natural caverns or erosion patterns. Schmidt's team drilled core samples to confirm the findings. The drill passed through rubble and limestone, then suddenly broke into emptiness. The space beyond was clean, preserved, hollow. Excavating 12 meters through unstable rubble and solid rock would require massive resources, far beyond what the Turkish government had allocated. Schmidt could document, he could scan, he could speculate. But he couldn't open the chambers. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. The radar revealed multiple chambers, arranged in patterns suggesting deliberate design. The largest, directly beneath the central circle of pillars, showed readings that defied explanation. Walls with millimeter-level smoothness, a space measuring roughly 7 meters by 4, and a ceiling nearly 3 meters high. In the center stood a raised structure, carved from the bedrock itself, geometric, altar-like. Those near the drilling sites reported strange experiences: headaches, disorientation, and a sense of unease with no identifiable cause. Compasses spun unpredictably. Electronic devices malfunctioned. Local workers refused to approach certain areas, particularly near the central pillars above the buried chambers. Schmidt remained scientifically detached in his notes, but privately he was unsettled. He had excavated tombs, temples, settlements, even fortresses across the Middle East, but never encountered anything like this. One incident haunted him. In 2007, an experienced excavator named Mehmet descended a 4-meter test shaft.
Most important for us in our excavation strategy, but it's not the only one, is the so-called Neo-Hittite period.
Positioned above one of the larger voids. While documenting stratigraphy, he spent 20 minutes at the bottom, then emerged pale, sweating, reporting a low-frequency hum, a vibration almost below the threshold of hearing. felt more than heard. An audio engineer brought recording equipment but captured nothing. Other team members felt the same hum. Seismologists detected no unusual vibrations. The phenomenon either operated on frequencies beyond measurement or was something else entirely. Schmidt carefully documented these anomalies in personal journals, never publishing them. The archaeological community was already skeptical of his theory that Göbekli Tepe preserved knowledge from a pre-catastrophe civilization. Adding unexplained phenomena would have destroyed his credibility. The central chamber puzzled him most. The raised structure measured roughly 2 meters long, 1 meter wide, half a meter tall. Its regular shape and deliberate placement suggested purpose. An altar, a table, a container. Electromagnetic readings from the surrounding stone fluctuated unpredictably, hinting at materials that shouldn't exist there. Metals, high-fired ceramics, or something else entirely. Schmidt concluded what the scans suggested. The builders had carved these chambers from solid bedrock with precision rivaling modern engineering and sealed something inside, something meant to endure, protected across millennia. And he believed, with near certainty, that whatever lay within would challenge everything we know about human history. But he also knew the investigation might never proceed. Resistance wasn't only bureaucratic, it was deliberate. Some things seemed meant to remain buried. In 2012, 2 years before his sudden death, Schmidt spoke to a German documentary crew. Off camera, he confided, "I believe there are artifacts in those chambers that will be very difficult to explain, very difficult to publish, perhaps impossible. Perhaps the world is not ready." He never got the chance to find out. The chambers remain sealed. The mysteries of Göbekli Tepe lie waiting beneath the surface, encoded in stone and preserved for a future perhaps wiser or braver than our own. The forbidden knowledge, the artifacts that made it into publication at Göbekli Tepe, was strange enough, but only the tip of the iceberg. Excavators recovered small objects from the rubble the builders had used to bury their own monument. Perfectly circular stone discs, some with holes drilled through the center with precision that defies understanding. Tiny stone beads required magnification to examine, with drilled holes smaller than a millimeter. How do you drill a sub-millimeter hole in solid stone using tools from 9600 BC? Archaeologists have no satisfying answer. Even more perplexing were the stone bowls. Dozens were found in the site's earliest layers, carved from limestone and basalt. Their exteriors were roughly worked, yet the interiors were polished smooth, not by hand, but with evidence of rotational symmetry, as if shaped on a lathe. Lathes, of course, require metal, bearings, and sustained rotation, technologies not supposed to exist until millennia later. Then there were copper artifacts, tiny fragments found in sealed contexts from the earliest layers of the site. Copper metallurgy shouldn't appear until 5000 BC, yet here it was in 9600 BC deposits, confirmed through rigorous radiocarbon dating. Klaus Schmidt, who spent 20 years at Göbekli Tepe, published these finds cautiously, with caveats about potential contamination, misdating, or alternative explanations. Privately, however, he understood the implications. The builders possessed knowledge and technologies far beyond what we credit for the time. The haunting question, where did they get it? The most controversial artifacts never saw publication. Schmidt documented them meticulously, measurements, photographs, detailed notes, but shared them only with trusted colleagues, warning that publicizing them would be professional suicide. These objects came from test shafts near sealed chambers and included stones carved with geometric precision approaching modern machine tolerances. Angles within 1/10 of a degree, surfaces flat within micrometers. One remarkable find from 2009 was a rectangular block of diorite, a dark, extremely hard, igneous rock not local to the area. Its 6 faces were polished to mirror smoothness, perpendicular to one another, and the corners razor-sharp. On one face were tiny abstract symbols, circles, lines, nested patterns that almost resembled mathematics. Schmidt consulted cryptographers, linguists, and mathematicians. None could decode the inscriptions. yet several noted similarities to early writing systems like proto-cuneiform, hieroglyphs, and even the Indus script. The implications are staggering. Written communication may not have begun in Mesopotamia around 3200 BC, but in Anatolia around 9600 BC, 6,000 years earlier than we thought. And if there was writing, there must have been something important to record. Schmidt speculated, privately, that Göbekli Tepe was built by survivors of a sophisticated civilization destroyed by the Younger Dryas event around 10,800 BC. These survivors had astronomical knowledge, precision stoneworking skills, and even metallurgy. In the aftermath, they built Göbekli Tepe as both a memorial and a library, embedding their knowledge in stone and then deliberately buried it for future generations. Schmidt never formally published this theory. It was considered too radical. Yet he remained obsessed with the sealed chambers. He submitted proposals for funding, lobbied Turkish authorities, and argued that this was the most important archaeological site in the world. By July 2014, Schmidt, aged 61, drowned in Turkey while swimming near the site. His death was ruled accidental, but colleagues noted the timing. He was close to private funding, about to reveal new findings, and his personal journals disappeared shortly after. Whether Schmidt's death was truly accidental or something more sinister, we may never know. Today, Göbekli Tepe continues to reveal tantalizing fragments, but its deepest secrets remain sealed. Artifacts hidden from publication, the chambers untouched, and forbidden knowledge, carefully protected for 11,000 years, still waits.
Göbekli Tepe, a site so old that it predates agriculture, pottery and permanent settlements built more than 11,000 years ago.
One question remains: will humanity ever uncover what the builders intended, or will their message remain locked in stone forever? The legacy of Göbekli Tepe. The excavation site sprawls across the Turkish hillside like a wound in time. Protective canopies shade the exposed pillars from sun and rain. Wooden walkways allow tourists to peer down at carved stones that predate their own civilizations by 100 centuries. Information plaques explain, in simplified terms, that this is the world's oldest known temple, built by hunter-gatherers in the Stone Age, a marvel of early human achievement. But those plaques don't tell the whole story. They don't mention the chambers. They don't discuss the impossible precision of the stonework. They certainly don't suggest that Göbekli Tepe might be evidence of a lost civilization that possessed knowledge we're only now rediscovering. The archaeological establishment has accepted Göbekli Tepe into the official narrative, but only by domesticating it, by filing off the sharp edges, by focusing on what fits the existing timeline and quietly ignoring what doesn't. Yes, it's older than expected. Yes, it requires us to revise our understanding of when complex monumental architecture began. But no, it doesn't require us to completely rethink human history. It's just an outlier, an exceptional case, an anomaly that will eventually make sense once we have more evidence. But the evidence keeps making it stranger. Recent excavations have uncovered additional pillars at the site's periphery. These pillars, dated to approximately 11,500 BC, push the occupation of Göbekli Tepe back even further. They also show evidence of even greater sophistication than the previously excavated structures. Larger stones, more complex carvings, astronomical alignments that suggest the builders understood precession of the equinoxes, a phenomenon that requires generations of careful observation to detect. Other sites have been discovered across Turkey and the Levant that share architectural similarities with Göbekli Tepe. Nevali Chori, Karahan Tepe, Harbetsuvan Tepesi, each one featuring massive T-shaped pillars, each one radiocarbon dated to the same impossible time period, each one suggesting a widespread culture of monumental construction in the 10th millennium BC. These weren't isolated achievements. This was a network, a civilization. But mainstream archaeology still hesitates to use that word. Civilization implies cities, writing, centralized authority, economic systems. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers. We know they were hunter-gatherers because they have to be hunter-gatherers, because agriculture hasn't been invented yet, because civilization as we define it doesn't exist yet. unless we're wrong about when those things were invented, unless our timeline is missing something, unless there was another chapter of human history that we've forgotten or never discovered. This is the legacy of Göbekli Tepe. Not answers, but better questions. Not certainty, but wonder. The site has forced archaeology to reconsider fundamental assumptions about human development. It has demonstrated that complex organization, sophisticated artistry, and monumental architecture existed thousands of years earlier than previously believed. It has proven that our ancestors were capable of far more than we gave them credit for. But it has also opened doors that cannot be easily closed. Once you accept that humans in 9600 BC could build Göbekli Tepe,
the stone structures were built between 9600 and 8200 BCE, making Göbekli Tepe the oldest known monumental site in the world.
you have to ask what else they might have built, what else they might have known, what else might be buried beneath our feet, waiting to be discovered, ready to shatter our comfortable assumptions about the past. Schmidt understood this. In his final published paper, released posthumously, he wrote, "Göbekli Tepe is not an end point, but a beginning. It is the visible tip of something much larger, much older, much stranger. We have barely begun to understand what our ancestors were capable of. And I suspect, based on what we've found here, that when we finally excavate the deepest chambers and examine the sealed artifacts, we will be forced to acknowledge that human history as we currently understand it is incomplete, that there are chapters missing from our story, that we are not the first civilization to rise, and we may not be the last. He died before he could excavate those chambers, before he could examine those artifacts, before he could prove his theory. But the stones remain, silent, patient, waiting, and the chambers beneath them wait too, sealed in darkness, protected by 12 meters of earth and stone, holding secrets that might rewrite everything we know about who we are, where we came from, and what we're capable of achieving. Someday, someone will open those chambers. Someday, we'll know what the builders of Göbekli Tepe considered important enough to preserve, what knowledge they carved into stone, what warnings they left for future generations. The question is, will we be ready for the answers? And so the pillars of Göbekli Tepe rise silently, holding secrets older than civilization itself. What did those ancient hands know, and what warning did they carve into stone for us to find? The answers remain buried, waiting. Will we ever be ready to listen? Ever be ready to listen? Ever be ready to listen?